Good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3, we're on page 1277. Aleph Resh Ayin Zayin. And we've been discussing here the difference between Zman Hazeh and La'asid Loveh. That mitzvahs generate the highest levels of the divine, much higher than the creation has on its own, as we learned earlier about Gan Eden and the worlds, that though they were created by God and Gan Eden on its own is higher than the rest of the worlds, but it's a completely new level when we generate it through Torah mitzvahs, which reach all the way, as he put it in the words of mitzvah, the word mitzvah connected to Havaya, the word Havaya, Yud Kei, Vav Kei, it doesn't just reach, the Vav Kei reaches the Yud Kei, and the highest levels of the Yud Kei, the Koitzer Shel Yud, which is like the Ratzon that's even higher than Chachma and Bina, in other words, higher than the within the Mashpia, as he's beginning the process of Hashpah, but he's still in the process, and there's even higher than that, all the way to the Atzmus and Muhusa the root of the containers, because that's where mitzvahs are part of the mitzvahs are connected to the level of containers, the Kalim, higher than the and that means Atzmus and Muhusa But then, as we learned earlier, it goes even deeper. It's rooted in the Helam Ha'ir. So there's Atzmus Muhusa which is a that's a very deep, internal, intimate type of but it's Then there's Helam Ha'ir, and then even higher, Helam Ha'atzmi, which goes all the way into Yechelis Ha'atzmus. It's rooted all the way there because that's where God, the Primius HaKavana, the Primius of everything that exists is rooted there. And that's what mitzvahs capture. The question, however, is it revealed or not? So in Zman Hazeh, meaning before La'asid Loveh, before the future, before Mashiach comes, it's mamshich it all. He says, and all this is happening, even the highest levels. However, Hakeli hu rak achshav hakeli b'chinas helam, va'eru b'chinas gili. But it's in a state of concealment. And the Eir is begili, so in a revealed level, we see the Eir is higher than the Kalim. La'asid will be revealed what is happening now, that the Kalim are really, and that the revelation of the Kalim being higher than the Eir, and actually being mashpia into the Eir. Like today, the body receives from the soul, then the soul will receive from the body, as he said at the bottom of page 1276, as we learned yesterday. And that's the Gili of Eden Stima, Ayin Le'rasa, all the different expressions, v'nigla kvoid havaya, v'lo yikonef oid merecha, and then mitzvah will no longer have the levush of the mem sadik, mitzvah will be the yud kei vav kei. Today, it's concealed in the chiluf, in the exchange of yud kei, being concealed by the mem and sadik of mitzvah. The vav kei is revealed, but la'asid lo will be yud kei. And even furthermore, v'oid zois, he said, even furthermore, it will be Shem Avayu b'Shem Yiyah, that even the Vav twice Yiyah, Yud Kei and Yud Kei. Shavov Yegam Ken Yud Kei. Shavov Kei Yegam Ken Yud Kei. In other words, in the Vav which is still a Vav it will be the Gili like it is in the Yud Kei. So in other words, in the outer dimension, the Chidsheni Yisrael will reveal the Pnimi Yisrael. Today it's also in there, but it's concealed. And that will be revealed both on the level of the Yud Kei and on the Vav Kei level. And that's what he said. So you see, there are two things, therefore. Two things will happen, La'asid Loveh. One, the Yud Kei, which today is concealed, will be revealed. That Etzem Ha'oyer, the Helam Ha'oyer, the Helam Ha'atzmi, the way it is in the Shosh Ha'atzmi, B'chinas Helam Ha'atzmi. And the second thing will be that which is Begili today will be elevated to the Eir Pnimi V'atzmi that we will see, the Eir Pnimi Atzmi also in the Vav Kei. So both things will happen. Okay. Then we learn the parentheses, which I was questioning what it means, but I see when we learn a little further, we'll understand what it means shortly. So I'll get back to that in a minute. I just wanted to say a few words about understanding what we're really addressing here. And you could ask a klutz kasha, like if something, it's called Meir Ha'ir L'Hoyer La'atzmei, he called it a few times, that the Yud-K is the level of Oyer HaMeir La'atzmei, which means, like Lifnei HaTzimtzum, before the Tzimtzum, the Oyer is only as God sees it, not as God is relating to the Oyer HaMeir L'Zulosei, which would be the difference between Yud-K and Vav-K in the highest levels, in the root. Just looking for the exact language. He said it a few times. Meir La'atzmei. Yeah, Ha'ir HaMeir La'atzmei. So like the difference between, even though we can't say it exactly that way, the difference between thought and speech. Within thought itself. So thought itself, the thought within thought, is how the thinker, the mashpia, is thinking about something, but he's not, but it's all to himself. Like we said before, Beinei Lebein Atzmei, 4 times Beinei Lebein Atzmei. It's all within himself. Then there's the Dibur Shebemachshava, how he's beginning to prepare and think about the other, how he's going to convey it to the student. So it's not exactly like that, but that's al derech zeh. Now we've also learned that there are levels even higher than that. Koydem alei saratzin. Like you say, ola b'machshava means that there was a machshava, then ola b'machshava. So there are levels that are even higher than consciousness and awareness, as I discussed. So we could understand that we have a relationship with the Oyer of the divine that relates to us. When we say that mitzvahs reach deeper, all the way to the Oyer as it relates God to himself, so you could ask that is, by its very definition, it means it's not for us. It's like, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Less machshava tfisa beklal. We can't grasp that dimension. We understand that God is God and God is beyond us. And yet we're being told that through mitzvahs, we actually access that, even though today it's concealed, but it will be revealed. So what does that mean exactly? And why is that so important? So I've explained this a number of times, but I just want to reiterate it because I think it will help understand the rationale behind this entire discussion here. And that is because of the profound interface. The Eibishter wanted us not just to understand him as he relates to us, but he wants us to understand him as he relates to himself. Now, of course, the highest levels of Atzmus will always be beyond our comprehension. But as much as possible, God reveals to us even his inner workings, even what's going on, so to speak, the king in his inner sanctum, where you could say that's off limits. He wants to tell us also about that. And it's mitzvahs that are the key that opens up that door. Because the mitzvahs are essentially God's gift. He's telling us what's going on in his inner desire. What does he really want? He doesn't just want, yes, he wants tachtenim, he wants a world like ours. But there's a purpose in it, adira b'tachtenim. And where does it express itself? In the mitzvahs of Hashem, mitzvahs havaya. So it's mitzvahs that open up that door. And that's why it's so critical to talk about the root of the containers. Because you could say again, the containers, fine, they have a root that's higher than Oyer. But who says that will ever be accessible to us? But the whole point of it is that. Why did he create the Kalim? Because he wants us to have access to a dimension of the divine that is not revealable through regular Oyer. And through all these levels. But he wants it also in a revealed way. So that's why you have both the Etzem and Pnimius Oyer together with the Helam and the Helam Ha'atzmi. So the deeper you go into Helam, even though by definition it means concealed, but God is giving us a taste of what is going on in his inner sanctum, so to speak. However, obviously we have to climb the ladder. You can't just jump there without going through the lower levels. Like a student that's learning Aleph Beis can't suddenly start trying to understand the brilliance of the teacher, let alone the Helam Ha'atzmi of the teacher. The fundamental concealed states that are intimately connected only to him in a way that he himself is not even conscious of. Think of a student. A student is just beginning to learn. As I said, even the regular giluyim of the teacher have to be diminished and concealed. And for sure, the deeper levels. But as he climbs and the kalim get expanded and they become more acclimated to the Oyer, because the Oyer is vital, because it's the giluy of everything. The Oyer is where the development happens. So Maisa mitzvahs is connected to the kelim. But we said we also need kavanah. We also need the rusa deliba. Like he said, rusa deliba, and we need to have simcha shal mitzvah. And avaraba and tainugim and all of that, and the growth of mutfa, murgish, and muskul. So the person has to be refined enough and train themselves. In other words, a student that's learning Ayin Beis, even though the kelim are rooted higher than the oir, but he's not accessible to him at that point. So first you have to develop your giluyim and expand the containers to receive more of the oir as a person becomes more and more refined and their emotions grow to a cognitive level and they become beyond their own subjective interests and how God relates to them. You begin to relate to God as God relates to himself. So then what happens is at some point, the oir itself leads you to the door, to the root of the containers, to relating to God as he is actually for himself, or as he radiates to himself, which allows us therefore to experience both the divine on the divine terms, but also the divine on our terms, because we grew and earned our right to experience this. So I just wanted to explain that because that's a critical component in understanding real the Havana and the logic behind what we're learning now. One more thing I want to say before we continue. Rabbi Shlomo asked yesterday about Atzmus. Where does Atzmus come into the picture? Atzmus itself, meaning Atzmus that's higher than the Kelim and the Eris and Helama Atzmi. So there is one reference. I said that I didn't see a reference, but the fact is, on the top of page 1276, the Rebbe Rashab does say, after he says that the Eir, that the Sharshan, the Shadish of the Kelim is Helama Atzmi, and the Yeshlema, that's the mitzvahs, the Ratzna Elyon, that's higher than Chacham and Bina, Keitza Shal Yud. And this comes down in mitzvahs Maisis today, like he said, by Chiluf the Asius. How does it come down in physical mitzvahs? Through the Mem Tzadik of the Chiluf. Okay. So then the Rebbe Rashab says on line 6, from the top of page 1276, he says, V'yesh b'zeh be'emes kol b'chinas ha'atzmus. It has in it kol b'chinas ha'atzmus. Now, what does he mean to add with this? I paused when we learned it, and I said that kol b'chinas ha'atzmus, you could touch a few ways. You could say kol b'chinas ha'atzmus means all the levels that we're talking about, etzem ha'oir, helam ha'atzmi, both the etzem of oir and the etzem of helam. We have that all through mitzvahs. But you could also say kol b'chinas ha'atzmus means, even though you usually don't say b'china and atzmus, that it means all the levels of atzmus. I'm not sure about that, but he does say kol b'chinas atzmus, rak shaba b'chinas islapshus. So I can't say definitively that he's talking about atzmus as is completely removed from everything, but he does say those words kol b'chinas atzmus. I just wanted to emphasize that. Okay, now, as I said, we're in the middle of the topic. There's going to be much more to be said about this, but I just wanted to give some of this context. So I'm going to go back now to page 1277, where we're up to. The parentheses, yesh lema b'derech efsher, the kamei b'chinas primis Atik or primis Abba, kamei kenye primis Abba ve'ima primis zun. He talks about it a few lines later, so I'm going to wait till we get there, and I'm going to go back to understanding it from what he says afterwards. But he's clearly saying here two things. Let's just sum them up. That there's going to be the Gili of Yud-K, which is today concealed, and that which was revealed today will also reflect and reveal what it is in the level of Yud-K, which is concealed today. So both things will happen. The Yud-K will be revealed instead of the Mem Tzadik, it will be the full Yud-K. And the Vav-K will be on the level of Yud-K. Now, he's going to explain a little what this means, and I'll also explain it as the Rebbe Rashab explains it. And then he says, so the parentheses we just read, we'll get back to the parentheses at the end of the paragraph. So I'm going to continue now. And these two things are interdependent. In other words, when you have the Gili of Yud-K, then B'meilu, Vav-K becomes like Yud-K. And he explains now why. They're interdependent, these two things. The Machsha'achshav yesh chiluk ben Yud-K le-Vav-K, because now, what is now difference between Yud-K and Vav-K? Hu mipnei she Yud-K hu b'chinas helam. like we learned earlier. Hanistoris la Hashem Elokeinu. Yud-K is the level within the mashpia, that he is the tzimtzum and the ispashas, but all within the mashpia, the transmitter. And he called that on page 1275, he explained why it's all in a state of concealment. So that distinguishes it from Vav-K today. The Yud-K is concealed, the Vav-K is V'hanigles, Lanu Levnein V'hanigles. It's revealed, the Vav-K. The Vav-K is the mitzvah as we tangibly can relate to it as a physical mitzvah. The Yud-K is the concealed pnimius within the mitzvah, which is also the pnimius of the Vav-K, but it's concealed. So that's what distinguishes today between Yud-K and Vav-K. Umashamer begili b'chinas Vav-K. What radiates now in a revealed way is the level of Vav-K today. Aval kasher pnimius is gala, but when the pnimius, which is Yud-K, will be revealed, the pnimius meaning the sheirush and of the kelim, as they are in the higher levels of the pnimius of Ein Sof, all the way to the Helama Atzmi, Yigili HaPnimius Gam B'B'chinas Vav-K. So as long as Yud-K is concealed, then Vav-K dominates, or Vav-K is at least the revealed state, and it's on the level of Vav-K. But once Yud-K is revealed, it also has an effect, like he said, Haba Hatalia, on Vav-K. That what happens? That Kshaprimis is God, Yigili HaPnimius Gam B'B'chinas Vav-K, V'Vav-K K'may B'chinas Yud-K. And Vav-K will be like the level of Yud-K. Let me explain what this means in using an example. I mean, I've used this example, the art and the building, a structure, a number of times, and I want to use it here as well, but a little differently than we usually use it. Usually we talk about the art or the structure of the building, that's existence. That's what God created, the world that God created. When I say world, I don't just mean this physical world, it means all the worlds. Atzilas, Bri, Yitzira, the whole Seder Shtalshus is God's artwork, or it's God's building. It has many levels in it. When you look at it ostensibly, you know that God, of course, is the divine wisdom, Chochma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvur, Teferes, Netzach, Yesed, Malchus, which are the building blocks of every part of this existence. So that's all divine energy. Chochma through Malchus, all divine attributes. Or even as it's rooted before the Tzimtzum is the Esosphere Sagnuzas, which means the Esospheres that God allocated to build this structure, to create this art. And you can spend your life studying that and discovering tremendous insights. That's what science is about. And even deeper, you can learn about God, because God is the one that created it. But at the end of the day, everything you're going to understand is going to be the godliness within the structure. If you want to know what's going on in God's inner mind, so to speak, when he created this, there you need God to reveal that to us. That's why it says, Ata Hareisa Ladas, God, Atzmus, the Alter Rebbe says, Ata, you, Atzmus, revealed yourself to us. How does he reveal himself to us? Not just through revelation, through Torah and mitzvahs. He gave us his Torah and his mitzvahs. By doing that, he's giving us more than just the structure and the art. He's giving us what's going on inside and the purpose of it all. So really, Torah mitzvahs is a pnimius dika, an internal peek, if you wish, an internal look at what's going on within God as he stands beyond existence. In a way, when we say Shabbos and the weekdays is similar. The weekdays is God as he invests in creation. Shabbos is Vayechul HaShamayim as God returns, not physically, but figuratively, back to his natural place, not Milu Dehedyeta. It's not the king as he is involved in mundane matters and creating existence, is the king as he is on his own. Shabbos Malkusa, the queen. Shabbos the queen. So everything goes back. Time goes back to its source. Everything goes back to the way it is on God's level, which is why Shabbos and Torah are equated. They both are higher than existence itself, the structure of existence. Okay, so now, but remember, we learned, if you remember, the difference between Havaya and Elokim. He said the other names on the bottom of page 1274, he said like this, that when He's talking there about the Isis. He was explaining why mitzvahs are connected to Havaya. So he said letters express the idea that they want to express. Isis Yutke D'Shem Havaya Bo B'Shem. So when he starts talking about Isis, he says Isis Havaya Pnimius HaKelim. When it comes to the other names, just want to see 1 second. Okay, Pnimius HaKelim. One second. Yeah, Chitzenis HaKelim, he says, with Shem Elikim and Shem Kel V'Tzvois. What does that mean? Those are the names that God uses to create existence. So that's why they're Chitzenis HaKelim. They're still Kelim, divine Kelim. They're divine instruments. Like the Asara Ma'amoros are divine instruments. These are the instruments God used to create. But it's Chitzenis HaKelim. If you remember, Chitzenis HaKelim is not the Mashpia, not the Oyer, not the Keli as it's receiving Oyer, the Keli as its mashpia outside of the Keli, to be able to drink from the cup or to be able to pour from the cup. So the other names are Chitzenis Keli. Havaya, he said, the Primus HaKelim is Shem Havaya, because Shem Havaya reveals to us, like mitzvahs, which is from Shem Havaya, the inner kavanah. However, then he continues, but in Shem Havaya itself, there's Primus HaChitzenis, Yud K and Vav K. So using the analogy of the art and the structure, mitzvahs are definitely higher than the structure and the art. But in mitzvahs itself, there's the mitzvahs as it relates to the art or to the structure. The mitzvahs as they manifest in Gashmis, in a klaf for tefillin, which is parchment, or in a physical esrig, or any other physical or actionable mitzvahs, which are most of the mitzvahs, and all of them relate somewhat to the material world, to the physical world. That's the outer dimension, like he called that Chitzenius Shebepnimius. Because even though it's Pnimius, because it's mitzvahs, but it's the mitzvahs as it relates to existence, which means it relates to us, Vavke. So in the Mashpia itself, it's the Makabel within the Mashpia. Whereas the Yudke is more the so-called what God knows about the God's Ratzon Elyon that's beyond us and is not revealed to us today. So you have in mitzvahs itself both dimensions. So how does it relate to the example? The example would be that, yes, there's a wisdom and there's understanding of God's energy within existence. Now we're talking about God's mitzvahs. In the mitzvahs, there's the mitzvahs as it relates to the art or to the structure, and there's the mitzvahs that relate more to God. So today there's a distinction. Because we're people of this existence, so even though we do have mitzvahs and we have more than just the divine energy within existence, more than just Asara Ma'amoros Livrei Elam, through La'avda L'Shamra, Adam being placed in Gan Eden, through our Avodah, we bring the energy of the Pnimius. However, it still remains fundamentally concealed, or basically concealed. And what's revealed is as the mitzvahs relate to this world. The Yud-K remains hidden. So therefore, obviously, the Vav-K is different than the Yud-K. But La'asid Lave, when the Pnimius, which means how God sees the whole thing, not just as the mitzvahs relate to the art, but what's going on in the artist's mind, or the creator's mind, the builder. What's really the Pnimius will be revealed, even the Yud-K, the Mashpia within the Mashpia, not just the Makabel within the Mashpia. The deepest levels of the Etzem and Pnimius Ha'er, all the way to Helam Ha'er and Helam Ha'atzmi, when that's revealed, what happens? Vav-K automatically is going to reveal Yud-K because it doesn't have a power of its own. All it is an expression. It was the external expression of God's interests and God's inner plan as it manifests in existence. So today, that's what we see, the mitzvahs. But when we'll see the Pnimius of it, the Yud-K, what will happen to the Vav-K? So the Vav-K, which means the mitzvahs as they relate to existence, will now reflect, like he says, they will reflect. So also in the Vav-K, which before we didn't see, now we'll see. And the Vav-K, which means the mitzvahs as it relates to existence, will also be like the level of Yud-K. That's what he's saying here. That's the power here. So in other words, a key point to remember is that, in other words, existence will not be annihilated, nor will the mitzvah that connects to existence. It's not just we travel into these deeper levels and everything else is forgotten. No. Dira b'tachtenim means that in the tachtenim, that today we only saw the outer dimension because we didn't see, we know there's a primis hakavana. When it becomes a dira b'tachtenim, a revealed dira that Hashem lives here, like one lives in a revealed way in their home, and their whole being is expressed there, including their etzem. So the Vavke too will be elevated to that level of Yudke, and all of existence will shine and be a transparent channel for these deepest levels of Elikus. Now that's only possible because of all the years of work that we did. If you try to do this in the beginning of creation, it would be impossible because the world did not have the kalim for it. Like I said, a child that's learning Ayin Beis can't suddenly experience the deepest levels of his teacher's mind. And here's so much more so when you're talking about Elikus, godliness, which is also the explanation, as I've told and said a number of times, why Matan Torah didn't happen right away. If Bereishis is B'Shvil Yisrael B'Shvil HaTorah, which means Primius HaKavana of existence. As I said, the Primius is Torah mitzvahs, and the Shamas is Torah and Yisrael. So why didn't, the whole creation was created for that purpose, so why didn't God give Torah right away to Adam and Chava? Why did it take 26 generations, basically 2.5 millennia, 2,448 years? The answer is because the world has to be ready for it. It can't just come from above. The whole point of why is the tzimtzum? The tzimtzum is because the kalim can't exist in the face of the divine, the infinite divine light, lifnei tzimtzum. So the tzimtzum conceals. Slowly the kav enters. It slowly reveals more and more and more. It's like, and that's why before Matan Torah is compared to like chinuch of a child, like just like a child is not born bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. Adam and Chava were an exception because they were created at 20. It's another discussion. But the point is that we need to go through education, training, and earn our way, mutfa murgish muskel. And as we prepare ourselves and acclimate ourselves, the kalim become more mature, more expanded. They're able to receive the oir, and all the way, ultimately, through the years of Avodah, of all the work we've done, Avodah Saberurim, through all the generations, we finally come to a point, La'asid Lavi, now the world is ready, not just to get Vavke, the revealed part of mitzvahs, Mem Sadik, and Vavke, because the Yudke is Mem Sadik concealed, but also Yudke and the Vavke too gets elevated to that level. That's the Haba Hatalia, interdependence of these two elements, that on one hand there'll be this higher revelation, and that will elevate Vavke to the level of Yudke. Okay, I hope that helped. Put it a little more in his slapshus. As I said, the Rebbe Rashab here speaking relatively briefly, even though he's saying enough to understand it, but it's not fully spelled out. Again, it seems to me, because of volume 3, where the Rebbe Rashab did not go back over, reviewed it again, not that God forbid anything's missing, but he wrote it in volume 1 and 2, you find much more development of ideas. And here I see some of this a little dense. That's why I'm spelling it out a little more. Okay. I'm happy to stop here if anybody wants to ask any questions. Okay, so now he adds, is barely ill dibra maskal pada b'shalom. He's telling us to look in volume 2, page 768. Okay, I have to look there what he says there. I'm trying to remember. The famous Maimer, Pada V'Shalom. It's a very big Maimer, the Rebbe. That was one of the only Maimer the Rebbe actually published before Ayin Beis came out. He published that Maimer. It was about Tzadikim, Chassidim.
Can I ask a question?
Look it up and I'll get back to you guys what it says there. Now the Rebbe Rashab concludes in the parentheses a little more insight into this. And that also is why I gave this longer explanation to understand this parentheses. And this will also help us understand the previous parentheses about Pnimius Atik and Pnimius Abba and Pnimius Abba Ve'ima Chachma and Pnimius Zun. So we'll get back to that parentheses shortly. Let me read this parentheses now. U'l'cheira yesh leimer. So Rebbe Rashab is saying, and what he just said now, l'cheira, seemingly you can say, and you see there's a lot of different expressions. Rebbe Rashab sometimes yesh leimer, you can say, that's his chiddush. Sometimes says yesh leimer b'derech efsher, you can maybe say. L'cheira means you can seemingly, l'cheira seemingly say. So there's different expressions how the Rebbe Rashab is expressing his way of explaining this idea. Now remember, the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe said that my father's yesh leimer is for me vadai. Whatever my father said, but derech efsher, maybe it's for me is certain. And very many times when the Friedrich Rebbe would cite a maimer from the Rebbe Rashab where he wrote derech efsher or yesh leimer, he would just write it as a fact. So yesh leimer from a Rebbe is not to be, but still, this is clearly the Rebbe Rashab is telling us alocheri yesh leimer, that what the makom mokim. So based on what we just learned, it seems that vovke and yudke are now going to be equal to asad love. So he says no. The makom mokim, nevertheless, even though yes, vovke will be elevated. The words he used, the gili of yudke. Gili apnimis will also be in Vavke. The year Vavke kamay b'chinas Yudke. Nevertheless, year Yudke gevoya b'maylam of Vavke. Yudke will still remain a higher level than Vavke. In other words, they're not going to just become equalized. Yes, Vavke will have elements of it, but there'll still be a distinction with Yudke being higher. Ukamay. Let me read it first before we explain it. Ukamay pnimius Abba. Atik. So there's an expression in Eitz Chaim, and the Rebbe already has a long footnote that we don't find exactly this expression, but it's a famous expression you'll find, Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik. Let me first explain the statement before we read inside. So Atik is the highest level when you're talking about in the structure. Atik is always removed. It comes from the word neta. It's the highest level. It's called sometimes Tachteina Shebemaitzel. It's the lowest level of the emanator. As God, the highest, Arich is the next level in Keser. It's Atik and Arich, two levels in Keser. So Atik would be called Pnimius HaKeser, and Arich would be called Chetzenis HaKeser. It's called Rishon Shebenitzolim. So if the emanator is here, and the emanations are here, in between is an interface called Keser. Keser, Atik represents, like so to speak, the lowest level of the emanator, the ayin of the yesh amiti, if you wish, sometimes it says, and arich is the ayin of the yesh nivra, is the racial itself. Now, atik and arich are two dimensions in keser, sometimes called inner and outer keser. When you count, by the way, the rabbeim in the spheres, you say the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid are keser, Baal Shem Tov is atik, and Magid is arich. The Alter Rebbe is chochma. Then comes the spheres, chochma, bina, das, etc. The difference is the spheres are already spheres gluyos. They're revealed. They're the conscious attributes of the divine. And in the human being, the conscious faculties, keches pnimim, from chachma through malchus. Atik and arich and atik are considered superconscious. In the language of the five levels of the soul, nefesh is nehi, the three lower spheres. Ruach is the midas, chagas. Neshama is chabad, chachma bina das. Chaya is arich, and yechida is atik. So that's the general picture. Now, next comes chachma. Now we know chachma is already a conscious faculty. Yes, it's a spark, a flash of an idea. But Chassidus elaborates, and Ayin Beis especially, what is the relationship between chachma and arich and atik? Or in psychological terms, what is the relationship between the conscious wisdom and the superconscious wisdom, chachmas timah, that I mentioned yesterday in arich and atik? What is the relationship between the conscious and the superconscious? So we know the superconscious is concealed from the conscious. But how concealed? So there's a dimension we spoke yesterday that's concealed, but not fundamentally concealed. So chachma relates to arich more like, think of like a reservoir of water as a faucet or a pipeline relating to the reservoir. So when you have a faucet and a drop of water comes out, so consciously we feel the flash of wisdom, of chachma. but we know that it's coming from some collective superconscious state. Then Atik, on the other hand, is a level that's completely beyond. It's a super conscious, if you wish. So in that context, we learned Chokhmah has many levels. Chokhmah can be the beginning of Bina. It's the spark of an idea that would be developed in Bina. That's how Chokhmah, the teacher, faces the student. Bina, Aleph Bina. Chokhmah is teaching Bina. But then there's Chokhmah, that's Chokhmah letters Pella. As the teacher, Chokhmah is looking at its teacher. Remember gazing, if you remember, Chokhmah Bina gazing at Arich, at the metzach of the forehead of Arich, and receiving the energies of Atik, Shinai and Nuhairin. So this is how Chokhmah is not looking down to Bina, it's how Chokhmah is looking up to its teacher, HaChokhmah Ma'ayin Timotze. That's the ayin of Chokhmah. So when you say Chokhmah, you have koyach ma. The koyach of Chokhmah is its intelligence. But the true nature of Chokhmah is the ma, the bittul and ayin of Chokhmah, that essence, that element that we learned about resonance. That Chokhmah is like hanocha sich hanocha, or riyah sichlis, the envisioning, a type of sensing a higher reality. Not Chokhmah as it is purely intelligence, but Chokhmah, the intelligence in order to experience the higher reality, the bittul, through bittul, the higher reality of Arich and Atik. That's a general picture how it works. And then you want that bittul to be transferred into the intelligence, and Chokhmah transfers it into Bina, and Bina into the Midas, and Midas into Malchus, which is a lot of what we spoke about as well, that it's Chokhmah, it goes downward, and then it goes also upward, how the Midas elevate Bina back to its core essence.
Last 2 months, have you tested positive for COVID?
Can everybody mute?
Rabbi Title needs to mute.
So, in that sense, it goes both down and then upward, whereas we learned the Midas catapult. Remember, aim revetzes ala frechim, and then when the Midas amur, the aim watches over and hovers and trains its chicks, its children, and then the other way, everything is elevated to look and gaze to the higher levels. Now, let's now introduce what is Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik in this context. So because the Kavanah, the whole purpose is interface between the superconscious and the conscious, interface between the highest levels of the divine. Because by the way, superconscious and conscious, you could also say is Yud K and Vav K. Especially when you're talking the highest levels before the Tzimtzum. You also have these two dimensions, subtly, as God relates to himself, as God begins to envision existence. But the ultimate goal is not just that Chokhmah should connect to the superconscious of Arich, but also to the superconscious, superconscious of Atik. So the Eitz Chaim says, and Chassidus brings that Pnimius Abba, if you go into the inner dimension of Chokhmah, that element where Chokhmah is recognizing a higher truth, it is able, and it's the same thing, it connects with and relates to Pnimius Atik. As a matter of fact, the expression is Pnimius Abba is Pnimius Atik. What does that mean? So in volume 1, the Rebbe Rashab explained it because Atik is pleasure. It's the core, undiluted, and seamless pleasure of the divine, which is the closest thing we talk about in the highest levels. Tainug Atzmi. We learned it also earlier. If you remember, Tainug Murgish, Tainug Bilti Murgish. Remember about Elam Haba, it doesn't have any sensation altogether. So these are the highest levels of pleasure. He also talked about it by the Simcha Shal Mitzvah. When he talked about the Simcha of the Eibishter, he also connected it to the Tainug Atzmi, the ultimate Nachas Ruach that God has from mitzvahs. So there's the Ratzon of Hashem in mitzvahs, and there's the Tainug of Hashem in mitzvahs. That's why I paused when he said Tainug is L'mayla Meratzon, Ratzon is Mayla Tainug for this reason. That's why I think he's meant Tainug there, Tainug of the human being. But we'll discuss that later once we finish the whole subject matter. So to go back here, so Pnimius Abba, he explained there, because real wisdom, he said, is pleasure, the pleasure of the divine. Wisdom is not about understanding things. It's about experiencing a higher reality. And there's no deeper pleasure than experiencing a higher reality. So Pnimius Abba, in its real deepest level, is Pnimius Atik. the highest level of Atik. However, it's very concealed, obviously. What's revealed is Chachma as it relates to Bina. The Chachma we know of is an outer dimension of Chachma, Chitzenius Chachma, not Pnimius Abba, Chitzenius Abba. And even there, it's relating to the levels of Arich, not necessarily to Atik, but Pnimius Abba is Pnimius Atik. So now he says like this. So he says, so Yudke is higher, even after Vavke becomes like Yudke, Yudke still will be Gavoya b'mayla mevavke. U'kamay Pnimius Abba, shukamay Pnimius Atik. The inner dimension of Abba, of Chachma, is like Pnimius Atik. Nevertheless, you're not going to say that Pnimius Abba is Pnimius Atik. You say it's like Pnimius Atik. But Pnimius Atik is higher than Pnimius Abba. So in other words, he's equating Yudke to Pnimius Atik and Vavke to Pnimius Abba. So today, you only have the Chitzenius, you have Vavke. Is only the revealed part. It's not, it's in, you don't, the Yudke is not revealed within it. The Abba will elevate to the level of Pnimius Abba, so we'll have Pnimius Atik like Yudke. But still, Yudke and Pnimius Atik, like Pnimius Atik, will remain still a higher level. Because at the end of the day, you say Pnimius Abba, you're still calling it Abba. You're calling it Chachma. So in other words, it's still in some ways how Atik manifests in the consciousness of Chachma. Or else what's the point? If Pnimius Abba disappears and it just becomes Pnimius Atik, you could just say no more Pnimius Abba. Everything is Pnimius Atik. No, you say Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik, because as I explained earlier, we don't want to annihilate consciousness. We don't want to annihilate existence. We want existence to experience the purity, the purest and pristine levels of super consciousness of Atik. In other words, in the conscious of Vavke, you want to experience Yudke, but Yudke still remains Yudke, and it's still a higher level. That's how he compares this. Yeah, that's the mimer I was referring to. That's where he talks about Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik. I'm going to look it up as well, where I think he says that at the end of the day, even Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik, and still Pnimius Atik remains higher. To put it in a little more tangible and understandable language, let me say this. Pnimius Atik would be the core essential, as I said, undiluted, a seamless pleasure of the divine in why he's built, in why, I don't say why, in the building and Dira B'Tachtein. You could say it relates to Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyas Leis Baruch Dira B'Tachtein. God had a desire to have a home in a home in this lowest of worlds. Now, that in turn created a whole process which includes intelligence, an intelligent world, an intelligent design, all driven by that taiva. So even though the taiva is the root of it all, but it does manifest because God wanted tachtenim the way they are right now, and there's a logical structure. So there's a chachma in my Bereshis. There's wisdom in this world. And there's wisdom that translates that taiva into intelligence. So the truth is, when you say Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu, Dira B'Tachtenim, the taiva will always remain higher than chachma. That's what a taiva is. The Alter Rebbe says, if a taiva is stuck in kasha. On chachma, you could ask a question. Chachma is intelligence. A taiva, he says, you can't ask why he desired because it's higher than why. But chachma, once there's a taiva that's higher than why, then God created a why, so to speak. Then he created reason, and in the reasons, he created reasons why he's creating existence. This is how the Rebbe explains that the ultimate reason for existence is nesava. It's higher than reason. But that higher than reason wanted reasons. So he created intelligence, but ultimately at the end of the day, as much as chachma can access the taiva, and that's Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik. In other words, in the wisdom of creation, when you learn, and you learn Torah and mitzvahs, and you're understanding what God wants of us, still there's always going to be some element that somewhat defies the structure of Abba, even Pnimius Abba. So there's an element where Abba relates to Pnimius Atik, and La'oselavi, that will be revealed. In other words, in the chachma of existence, And in its inner dimension, there's that resonating truth of the higher reality of Pnimius Atik, of the divine essence, but still, it still remains something higher than Chachma, even Pnimius Abba. So that's why Pnimius Atik remains higher. So Yud-K, even when the Vav-K is revealed within it, the Yud-K, the Vav-K is still B'mayla Gavoya. The Efsher Yesh Leimer. Now the Rebbe Rashab goes another F. Now he says Efsher Yesh Leimer. Before he said L'cheres, seemingly Efsher means maybe you can say. Efsher Yesh Leimer you can say the similar thing. B'chlol is b'china zun. In the general levels of Zah and Nukva, Zohar, Ampin, and Nukva, which is Midas and Malchus, you could say the same thing, that when La'asad Lave, Malchus will elevate to the level of Zah. As we know, the moon and the sun will be equal, and yet Zah will still remain higher. That's what he seems to be suggesting. However, there's one qualification. Aval b'chinas ha-Malchus. So in general, you can say that, but Malchus, Tiyeh b'chinas izgalus helam ha'atzmi mamish. As we learned earlier, Malchus is going to be the revelation of helam ha'atzmi mamish, which we learned is actually Malchus will be mashpia in Zah. So on one hand, there will be this element that Yud-K will be higher than Vav-K, but I'll explain in a moment, but there's something here that he's saying will also be in Zah and Malchus. Zah will have still a quality over Malchus, but Malchus will be revealing the Helma Atzmi Mamish of Yud-K. V'zeu ikir inyan sha'keli tiye begili mipnei she'izgala bo shosha atzmi. And that's the primary idea, that the Keli will be revealed, because what will be revealed in it is its shosha atzmi, it's its core root. I know this can be confusing, so 1 second. Is Vav-K like the Keli, or is the Keli rooted in Yud-K? Because before we've been learning that the Kelim are rooted in the previous of the mitzvah, which is the Yud-K. And now he seems to be suggesting, how does it go here? Is the Yud-K higher than the Vav-K, or the Vav-K higher than the Yud-K? So it's not 100% clear. I do know from other Maimorim that this is a discussion, but I'm going to go with the simple approach right now, that he wants to make the case that at the end of the day, Yud-K is higher than Vav-K, and Vav-K is not the Kelim. Vav-K is the Gili to us. It's actually Oir. The Keli is rooted in Yud-K. Today, it's concealed, and the Mem Tzadik Yud-K is in a state of Mem Tzadik. La'asid Lave, the Kelim will be revealed, the root of the Kelim, which is in Yud-K and the highest levels of Yud-K. And the Vav-K, how it's revealed in this world, will also experience it, but it'll still remain on a lower level. So the question is, what does he mean? Kein b'chol is b'china zun. What is b'china zun? Is Zah and Malchus like Yud-K and Vav-K? Or is he trying to say, and that I'm not sure about, or is he trying to say that the way you could say with Zun would be like this, the other way around. Malchus is like the Keli, Zah is like the Oir. Today the Oir is higher than the Keli. But the truth is the Keli is rooted in Yud-K, which is higher than the Vav-K of the Oir. So when Yud-K will be revealed, that even the Vav-K of Oir will also experience the power of the etzem of the Keli, still the Yud-K will be higher. You could say that's what he means here. But it's not so 100% clear, because initially it seems to say one thing, then another. But as far as Chachma and Bina go, as far as Abba and Atik go, that's clear. That Abba, he's comparing Atik and Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik to Vav-K and Yud-K, that's for sure. And just like when the Vav-K gets elevated to Yud-K, nevertheless, the Yud-K remains higher. So I would say it's like this probably. The Oir will also be elevated to the level of Etzem, La'asad Lave, but still, Keli will still be higher. The Yud-K will still be higher, even when the Vav-K gets elevated to Yud-K. That's what I believe he's saying in the parentheses. Let me say one more thing about the first parentheses, and then I'll stop for any questions. So in the first parentheses, the Rebbe Rashab said, now we can understand it better, I believe. Because there he said that also the Vav-K b'chinas er pnimi b'atzmi. V'yashlem b'derech kamei b'chinas Atik or Pnimius Abba. Exactly. What does that mean? That Pnimius Abba is like Vav-K, and Lasid Love, a Primus Atik could be like Primus Abba will be Primus Atik. So Vavke be like on the level of Yutke. The Kamoi B'chin is Primus Atik or Primus Abba. Kamoi Ke ye Primus Abba ve'ima or Primus Zun. And I think what he means by that is that the Primus Abba ve'ima will also be that way. That there will be revealed in the Chitzenius of Abba ve'ima will be revealed the Primus. And the same thing with Zohar Malchus, in the Chitzenius will be revealed the Primus, meaning in the Vavke of it will be revealed the Yutke. That's what I think he means now. I'm not 100% positive, to be honest. I want to read it again and again until I figure it out for sure, because you could touch it different ways also. Because what he says, Kamoi b'chinas Primus Atik or Primus Abba, Kamoi Kain. But you could read it several ways. You could say, the Yudke Vavke, the Kamoi B'chinas Primus Atik or Primus Abba, comma. Then you could say, and Kamoi Kain, Ye Primus Abba V'ima Primus Zun as a separate clause. Or you could say it flows from one another. I'm not sure about this. I don't want to confuse matters more. So let me stop right here. I'm going to look into it some further. And let me, okay, let's, any questions? This was a pretty heavy class. A lot of stuff in it, but I think I tried to explain it a lot more in Chabad, Chachma Bina Das, to make more sense of the whole thing. So I hope that was helpful.
If we go back to the beginning of this Chelik Gimel.
Before you continue, one second.
Oh.
Did everyone understand what I said today in this class, or it's above your head?
I'm still processing, but yeah, I thought it was really good. I'm still processing, but that's why I want to ask a question.
Okay, so go ahead.
So the beginning of this Chelik, we talked about in Lasi Lavo, the moon will shine brighter than the sun. And basically, but here, where you just concluded, it seems to be inconsistent with that.
No, it's exactly. That's what I just elaborated. No, it's not inconsistent. It's exactly that. I said that the Kalim will be higher than the Oyer. Yud-K will be higher than Vav-K. Yud-K is the root of the moon. Vav-K is the root of the sun.
Mm-hmm. I have to go back and think about that. I thought that Vav-K was Tachtonim.
No, the Vav-K is the revelation in Tachtonim.
Uh-huh. Okay, I'm going to listen to this class again.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about that last line the whole time, and it seems to be that the Rabbi maybe the changes about the Chinas Malchus, Shitiyah the Chinas Galus, Helamatsu. We've been learning the whole time that mitzvahs itself, Gashmi's mitzvahs are able to reveal the highest level of Helamatsu. And it would seem like, as about Yitzhak was just saying, Vav-K, the Hay is Malchus in Yitzhak Vav-K, which is the mitzvah itself. So I thought that Yud-K, Vav-K, that Vav-K, the mitzvah.
Well, what's that? What you thought. The question is what the Rebbe Rashab is saying. If you go back, I would suggest to everybody to go back from page 1274 and read on from there. You have to go back and understand what the Rebbe Rashab is saying. He said mitzvahs have two dimensions, Mem Tzadik and Vav Hey, Yud K and Vav K, right? So you have to understand what's the difference between the Yud K in the mitzvah and the Vav K in the mitzvah. The Yud K is concealed today, and the Vav K is revealed. He did not say Yud K is that's the part of the mitzvah is Yud K. Yes, mitzvahs and the kalim of mitzvahs are rooted in Yud K, but today you only see the outer revelation of it as it relates to the physical world. You don't see the real deeper shadish atzmi of it in the helama atzmi in the highest levels. So we're talking, everything here is about mitzvahs, but it's two dimensions in mitzvahs. So I think you're misunderstanding. I think you're thinking that the Vav K, he said, was higher than the Yud K. No, he never said that. That the Vav K, the mitzvahs as they come in Gashmis, and what about the mitzvahs that the Yud K is also part of the mitzvah? However, it's the root of the mitzvah coming into Gashmis. Well, Vovke is only the outer expression as we can relate to it, which is as it comes into Gashmis.
So when we learned earlier, the malchus that was it DT Achosi Dini, that eventually the mother will the DT.
He said this. He said the same thing here on the bottom of page 1276. The guf will feed the soul. The kalim will feed the air. Correct. That's malchus.
So wouldn't that seem to indicate that it's higher than the?
It's higher than the air. It's Yud K is higher than Vav K. Exactly.
Yud K, I thought again getting back to the BT.
You're misunderstanding. He never said that Vav K is higher than Yud K. He never said such a thing. You're not hearing what I'm saying. Read the Maimer. He never says. The misunderstanding is you think that Vav K is Kalim. It's not correct. All of mitzvah is Kalim. There's two parts to it. There's what we see of it. That's the Vav K. Nigles, the Nigla part that we can see as it manifests in this world. The Yud K today is concealed. The Etzem, which is the root of the Keli, the root of Malchus is concealed today. So it's like looking only at the outer level of Malchus. So you see a moon. It's lower than Ur, than the sun. And the Yud K in the Keli, which is its root, will be revealed, and then you'll see that it's higher than the sun.
Yeah, now I understand.
So the Yud K is the Etzem Ha'or?
He said three things about Yud K. Etzem Ha'or, Helem Ha'or, and Helem Atzmi.
Okay.
And it's all there. If you read on top of page 1277, he says, the be'emes shekenu gam achshav. Also now in the mitzvah it's there. Rak achshav shakeli b'chinas helem va'er b'chinas gilal ken achshav v'mayla sha'er ala keli. All I suggest is, it's not. Listen, it's not. You're not going to always be able to get it on the first bounce. There's a lot of stuff here. I suggest read it again. You can listen to the class again, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll talk about it more tomorrow. Continue the discussion.
Is there a concept in the Chassidus of kits? It says Panemius Abba is like Kamo Panemius Atik. Is there an expression of Kitsonius Atik? How does the Chachma get into Panemius Atik without going first through Kitsonius Atik?
Of course, all the avodah today is reaches. That's the whole thing. Of course. I explained that length. You can't get the premius without chitzenius. That's the whole avodah we do. Is first getting to the levels of chitzenius, and from there, the osud lave will be the revelation of premius. You don't jump to premius. Exactly the point.
So
as a matter of fact, the expression is that all the giluyim come from chitzenius atik. And la'asud lavi, through all the avodah of Torah mitzvahs, Pnimius Abba will reach the Pnimius Atik. La'asud lavi will be the gili of Pnimius Atik.
So in our terms, custodius Atik is external pleasure, so to speak, because Pnimius Atik is God's pleasure.
I would put it this way, it's the pleasure as it relates to existence, more.
Okay, as it's related to Makaba, rather than the Mashiach himself.
Well, actually, I wouldn't call that Pnimius Chitzenius Atik. I would call that Chitzenius Arich, to be honest. That's more Arich. But in Atik, in the pleasure, it's how Atik relates to Arich, if you wish. That's the more correct way to put it. Chitzenius Atik relates to Arich, and Arich relates to the Shtal, to the Spheres. This goes back to the discussion, what's the difference between Tainug and Rotzen? Atik and Arich. The Tainug is the deepest level. Rotzen is already how God is extending and wants something, wants creation. Remember, Koydem Alesa Rotzen is more the level of Tainug, not Rotzen yet. And then comes the Rotzen has levels. And then the Rotzen, the will to have a building, a structure, a Tachtenim, then create, then that in turn generates the Chachma Bina and so on. So this goes back to the discussion in volume 1. Rotzen is more makif, sevav kalaman. and the internal spheres are ma'malakalam, pnimius. So it's about the pnimius of existence connecting to the more transcendent levels. Really much more to be said about this whole topic. I'll give an overview maybe in the next class or next few classes. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Sure. So anyway, we'll stop here at the end of the paragraph.